Sorry, let me see. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I have to admit, my talk is more geeky, so I have no chance in hell to compete with the previous speaker. My slides are not going to have any cognitive biases. It's just mathematical. So I'm Anish. I happen to be co-founder, CTO, and the chief scientist. Over there behind, hiding from the audience, is Mark. He's the lead cryptographer. This work was done by the research team in total. So a couple of us are not here. Steve is not here. Kapil is not here. Sergio is not here. So, it's not mine or Mark's alone work, but it's the team's work. So having said that, I'll try my level best to explain. At any point in time, if something doesn't make sense, put your hand up. I'll try my level best. No promises, okay? So what are we here to talk about? I want to give you like an idea about something that we found interesting, and we try to solve it. This is the problem. The problem is like, everybody actually uses clients. So for example, the last talk was pretty much about wallets. Wallet is a light client, right? You don't download everything you need onto your laptop, onto your server to do anything, okay? When you want to do a light client, there are a bunch of constraints, things that you want to have in a nice shape in that sense. In this instance, we were interested in having a light client for doing bridges. So we looked at various bridging mechanisms, and we looked at Tendermint. And literally, that's the start of this thing. So we have a mathematical solution for a set of problems, and this problem seems to be one of the nicest ones that we found the users could have the biggest benefits. So how does Cosmos consensus work? It's a Byzantine fault-tolerant protocol. So for any of the people in here, Byzantium. But that's a fake one, okay, just for everybody's sake. It's nothing to do with that. Somebody cooked it up, okay? So it's this construct that there are a bunch of people, they're supposed to go to a war, the generals have to agree, and if they don't all agree, there's a chance that everybody might die, right? Because a fraction of them go into war and they might die. So this is the whole consensus construct. So, and the thing is, like, it uses a signature scheme. So it's called EDDSA. So most of the people in this room might recognize the ECDSA, but it's just Edwardian, so that's the ED in that sense. And yeah, so let's get on and see if it makes sense. Okay. So what does consensus in a light client mean? The consensus in a light client means that you want to check something without actually having gone through the real trouble of checking everything that's there, downloading everything and checking everything. Downloading everything and checking everything is very expensive. You have to download, you have to wait for that, and then you need to do the individual check for each of them, right? So, and the other part of this thing is like, I was talking about the Byzantium problem, right? So the more the number of generals, it's harder for everybody to get to consensus, right? So if there are two people, getting to consensus is easy. Just the handshake-wise, it's n factorial, right? Essentially, what that means, the number of handshakes you need to have to get to consensus. Imagine it's 3 into 2, that's 6, right? And then you add one more, it's 4 into 3 into 2, right? See the way it's increasing? So it increases exponentially. And yeah, pretty much the other part of it is like, as the set of validators increase, it's pretty much impossible to actually validate all the signatures in that sense. As I said, like, signatures increase. And there's this other construct that everybody has. When you have a large number of things which are similar, you put it into batches, right? In signature schemes, we actually batch the signatures. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work. Okay, now, this is the obvious solution. If you are used to having a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you are used to doing zero knowledge, and you eat, breathe, and sleep SNARKs, everything that comes to you, you end up actually having a SNARK. And I would be surprised that if there are any solutions in this room other than a SNARK to provide privacy. You can have other solutions. I'm just giving you the chances are the majority of the solutions here are going to be SNARKs. So, as a team that works in privacy, yes, we looked at SNARKs. It's a bit, so in general, if you have SNARKs, if they're pairing based, they generally tend to give you like a proof size which is constant and makes it almost feasible for you to have light clients. So, okay. why do we need the SNARK, and what is the SNARK actually giving you as a proof? All it says is like, I set a valid ED 25519 signatures for a message from a quorum of validators. Okay, let me explain this in normal English. Essentially, all it means is like, imagine you have an agreement, like a committee. You have 7 people, out of that, at least 5 of them have to agree, right? So all it does to say is like, here, I have this magical mechanism to prove to you that I have signature of 5 out of the 7. End of story, right? Okay, so why is it that this becomes a problem? The problem is just with math, right? Generally, every math that you work on, scheme that you work on, has some nuances. And the nuances really, really make it or break it. The problem that could actually break this is this. If you ever have a non-native field arithmetic happening, the size of things just blow up, right? 150 to 300 size, which is pretty ridiculous in a normal sense of speaking. So, okay, this is another slide to just explain what I just said, in the sense like, I'll try my level best to explain exactly what that means. So typically everybody, when they talk about curves, there are a bunch of curves that are there, right? And one of the normal ones is a BLS 12381. It is a 128-bit security. I'm assuming everybody in this room has some idea of security margin. Can I have a show of hands of security margin? Okay, wow, I'm impressed, thank you. So for the rest of them, imagine this, right? Imagine you had something very valuable like Mars bars, right? And you want to put it in a safe, right? And the security margin of the safe is like the value of the Mars bars that's there. That's essentially what it means, so loosely speaking. Like if you get broken into, what's the loss you have, and what's the translation of security in that sense? Okay, so the thing I wanted to say was like the circuit size blowing up is pretty much as a side effect of like a non-native arithmetic that you would actually use. And effectively, this constrains the set of curves that you can actually have. And this is what we thought we could add as a contribution, and like be able to do even when, have constant size of proofs even when the underlying curve is non-native, right? Okay, yeah, there you go. So typically everybody uses curves like this, right? This is like 255 minus 19 kind of thing. So is everybody familiar with names like Groth? Groth is Jens Groth, that's his surname. He created a scheme in 2016, so that's that. Planck is an acronym, but that's the Aztec guy. Zach and Adel Gabison. Marlin, I forgot who it was, but one of those people, right? There are different schemes. Groth is one of the earliest ones, and it actually has AVANCS, and Planck has a lookup thing, and like Marlin is more or less like that. So the real difference is like you need one setup for every circuit you have in Groth. For Planck, you can actually have a universal setup, and then you can derive things. Yeah. But in summary, all it is like, this doesn't really work specifically with fields that doesn't have 2 raised to n roots of unity for a large n. So if you were to think about it, as I said, there's some constraint you have, right, which actually pretty much dictates what you can actually have as a curve to do any of this kind of schemes. And if the curve criteria is not met, the size of the proof that you end up with is very, very large. And in conditions like when you have a bunch of nodes, a large number of nodes in that sense, having to agree to a consensus, and you have to validate things, the size of the proofs, when it becomes large, it becomes really hard for you to download. And second, as the size of the proofs are large, the time it takes to actually compute will be larger. So, simple. Okay, so essentially, what are we trying to do? Create a pairing-based SNARK that can be instantiated with any pairing-friendly curve of suitable size. No specific requirements of the roots of unity in that sense. And use, for this instance, we were looking at the pairing-friendly curve E scalar field of 255 minus 19, which, okay. And yes, now you might ask, why did he call Fimonk? Essentially, it's a monomial, so we decided instead of L, we'll have an M, okay? So pairing-based SNARKs that works with any pairing-friendly curve of a suitable size. We're literally looking at the special instance where we are looking at ED25519, right? So you can actually work on an arbitrary curve. It just looked at this one. So a feature, what the feature is, I mean, the key feature is like works on any pairing-friendly curve of an arbitrary size. And verification time is kind of constant and dominated by a single pairing check, okay? And the size of the proof is 11 G1 elements and 19 FP elements. It's pretty much that. Like, again, it's 1.4K for the given curve, but based on the size of the curve, things might vary. Proof generation, multiscalar multiplication. Everybody has heard of that thing? Yes, okay. So generally speaking, when you do SNARKs, there are two things. There's an FFT and an MSM. FFT is a Fourier transform, and a slight variant of it is a not true Fourier transform. Multiscalar multiplication is the thing that actually allows you to multiply a very large thing in the scalar. So these are the two things that are there in any arbitrary SNARK in that sense of speaking. So we have 11 MSMs, and most of them, they don't allow you to parallelize it. And this nice property is you can actually parallelize it. It doesn't really matter the order in which you actually multiply, right? So you can actually have a stack of them, and then you parallelize it and you can compress it. And yeah, and essentially the total computation is six polynomial products, which is one inverse FFT and 6 FFTs. And this could be parallelized. I'm going ahead on my slides. So if anybody is familiar with all of this, have a look. Otherwise, I'll skip this because A, I'm running late. B, I don't want to bore you to death. So yeah, essentially, it's about indices, and this is kind of how you would look at it. But so two kinds of gates are there: the arithmetic gates and the multiplicative gates. It's essentially you look for the right and the left, and you have an output, and you have an operation there like that. I mean, if you are familiar with Planck, this might look very familiar. So this is for the set of people who understand Planck to just do a compare and contrast. And yeah, it's somewhat analogous to Planck gates, right and the left. And there's a multiplicative one over there as well. So yeah, similarly, permutation argument. So again, for the folks who are neck deep into SNARKs and understand the permutation argument, in this case, it very much boils down to the Hadamard product, right? That's literally the way I would describe it to somebody who's from the Planck world and say to them, oh, this is how the difference is. And yeah, the permutation, that's how you describe it. Like if you shift it, it'll be coincides with that thing. But in summary, all it means is like, if somebody were to really look at a permutation argument Planck and compare a permutation argument, you will see some similarities. That's all I meant to say. Right, and you know what? I'll skip all this, go to the times, and then give you a chance to ask me questions. So again, cloud construction. Okay, so this is kind of, we did a bunch of testing, and we wanted to give you some numbers, so at least you get an intuition. We are not the fastest, but if you actually look at larger sizes, we would definitely beat everybody right now, okay? Fair, very open, fair statement of facts. And we will probably publish some of our results in a shorter period in time, and then you could actually have a look and look at the things and decide for yourself, rather than taking my word for it, or Mark's word for it, or Steve's word for it. So this is, standard stuff. It's a simulated thing. So it's a Schoenhager-Strassen algorithm. So if you look at the sizes, 10 to the power 5, 0.12, 10 to the power 7 is 18. Okay, and when you do the FFT over unfriendly curves, 10 to the power 7 is 15. This is 254, BL254. Right, and this is the unfriendly one, and average time for 100 runs is, with the degree 10 to the power 6, is 1.97 seconds. And yeah, that's all that was. For all of you who haven't fallen asleep, that is the whole summary. Oh yes, please.
Approximately how many signatures you can validate before Planck? Okay.
Sorry?
Approximately when the bottleneck starts if you don't use Planck, if you just use Planck, the regular one.
Yeah.
After how many signatures you validate
I mean, bottleneck depends on your backend, right? Imagine you had an MSM and an FFT. You can't actually parallelize straight up. You understand what I'm saying, right? Yeah, so imagine you're a hardware, you're interested in hardware, you want to accelerate it. This is really good because you have no constraints. You can just randomly. Yeah. It doesn't change any of the constraints. So essentially, all you do is make it slightly faster. Security margin for the underlying thing is absolutely the same. In fact, less than BFT in one sense of speaking, because ECDLP and even less than that, if there's a pairing, even less than that, right? So you should think of it like less than a BFT in that sense.
Does the proposal has any constraints on top, like make it in the same way as CK was, or does it have any, let's say, additional constraints over the constructions that was launched?
Okay, so I am not the elliptic guy in the team. The elliptic guy in the team is missing. I shall ask him, rather than me giving you as far as I understand it, my understanding is only after master's level. I did my thesis in attacks on elliptic curves, donkeys years ago now. So I'm not like, if you wake me up and ask me about something, I couldn't give you. But my understanding is like isogenies are not a constraint for us, but I will check and I'll get back to you rather than talk nonsense.
One more question.
Thanks for the presentation. I have two questions, but very simple questions. First one is, did you consider the recursive case?
Oh, yes, we did, yeah. We can't actually, it was in the slides. I didn't go through the slides, I just, yeah.
And the second one is about security analysis.
Sorry?
Sound analysis. I wonder if this construction is simulation acceptable.
Why don't we do this? I'm very happy. Mark stood behind you. After this, we can have a chat. I don't want to hold people there. Right.
One final question.
Have you considered Halo 2 or looked at Halo 2 for any of the cooling systems for your circuits?
We have been looking at a bunch of things all the way. So when I wrote, I shall put my hand up and say, when I wrote the white paper, I was interested in Halo. It had a very interesting set of characteristics. I thought about it. But unfortunately for us, if you are in the Ethereum space, the curve is a bit of a constraint. And that doesn't allow you to do certain things. And that is part of the reason why we have all this conversation as well, right? Like if you have a layer one, the layer one creates a bunch of constraints for you on the choice of curves you can have. And that kind of reduces your choice of schemes you can have as well. Halo 2, the choice of curves, Zcash has a set of curves that's not really friendly with Ethereum. I don't know if they all had a lot of beer and decided to have a set of curves, then we might. Thank you all very much.